Welcome to a pre-Christmas edition of YCN Stark Reality. I'm your host, Keith Hanson. This week, we're going to be speaking with author of A Rush to Judgment, A Journey with Trump, God, and Love, Sid Bowdidge. It's going to be a great episode. Hopefully, you can stick around. Come on, let's go have some fun. Welcome back to Stark Reality. I'm Keith Hanson. Since it is Christmas, we're going to keep it light this week. I know I had said last week that we were going to be focusing on Dems behaving badly, and that segment will come back next week. However, I had an opportunity to speak with my guest on my radio program and read his book, and that's why I wanted to make sure that we got him some camera time before he heads to the Sunshine State. My guest this week is Sid Bowdidge, author of A Rush to Judgment, A Journey with Trump, God, and Love. Sid, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
So, fascinating book about how you started off as a campaign volunteer here in the state of New Hampshire for President Trump, and then eventually became a staffer on the campaign.
Right.
And then you wrote a book about this. So, why? What was it about Trump, first of all? Then?
Well, certainly, you know, and I was very blessed and very humbled by the entire journey, but God took me on a journey of a lifetime that most people will never have the opportunity to be taken on. So I was very, very fortunate. And certainly in the beginning, and where God comes into play in the book is a month before I joined the campaign as a volunteer, was when I came to my relationship with God. I wasn't a believer before that, and that's all explained in my book. And then, of course, He used me according to His plan, to do what I did to help then Mr. Trump become President Trump. And but certainly, what drew me to him originally, I went to a house party in Bedford, New Hampshire, and at the time it was he was coming there, and the reason to go was simply for the entertainment factor. You know, I wasn't into, in terms of being educated on what he was running on, I didn't know at the time. But I've always been involved in politics in the sense of keeping up on what's going on, what's happening in the world, and so forth. So went there, listened to his agenda at this house party, which there were probably 250 people at. It was packed. And listened to him talking about making America first, bringing jobs back from overseas. So all these things I was very much aware of how we were really sliding off the slope into socialism for years, especially 8 years of Obama. And I just couldn't see it continue to happen. And so listened to his agenda and came away saying, wow, imagine that. I actually feel proud to be an American for the first time in, I don't know, a decade or so. And so that's what drew me in. That's what pulled me in, was his agenda of making America first, basically saving our country, bringing God back into, the realm of our country, which had been taken out of for so long. And that's, so one thing led to another. I started volunteering, setting up events for him, putting in more and more hours every week, setting up events, taking them down. Then they asked me if I would be willing to start driving in his motorcades. And he was at times coming here sometimes twice a week, every week. So driving in the motorcades became more and more thrilling as time went on. And then Secret Service started to come into play once his life had been threatened enough. And that became even more exciting. So again, setting up events, taking them down, driving to the motorcade. And then finally in October 2015, they were opening the Keene campaign office, and I was asked to come on staff, and I was hired to run that office. And what we saw was Democrats pouring into, even in Keene, pouring into the campaign office saying, I've been a Democrat my whole life, and I can't tolerate to watch what's happening to this country any longer. I'm voting for Trump. Can I get signs? Can I help? I'd like to volunteer. What can I do? So, those were by the hundreds, and you just felt that growth of the movement. I mean, that's what it was. It was a movement. And, and as I said to you before, it was critical that we win. I mean, once I saw what his agenda was, and you saw him starting to slice and dice all the other candidates and take them out, and how he was doing it, it became more believable that he was in it for the right reason. And it was to really save the country from the scourge of socialism. So
I think one of the big questions is, we have to jump to a quick commercial break, but when we come back, I want to talk about his ability to do what he campaigned on based upon the fact that he was an outsider. And we're going to continue our conversation with Sid Bowdidge when Stark Reality returns right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to Stark Reality. I'm your host, Keith Hanson, and this week I'm joined by author of A Rush to Judgment, A Journey with Trump, God, and Love, Sid Bowdidge. Sid, again, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Keith. It's great to be here.
What I think fascinated a lot of people with President Trump was his ability to hone in on the issues that mattered to average Americans. You know, when you listen to his speech, I think if you run his speeches through a Fleischman-Kincaid, it's about an 8th grade level. And there are a lot of people out there, a lot of detractors that said, you know, Trump's an idiot, listen to the way he speaks, listen to how he's repeating things over and over. But he had an amazing ability to connect with average Americans. I mean, those Americans that really have been ignored, and dare I even say insulted by politicians really on both sides of the aisle. You know, that flyover country that people, you know, don't really want to go to, or they just kind of ignore that population. Certainly the bitter clingers, as we were called by President Obama.
Right. What
was it about President Trump, and specifically about the fact that he was an outsider, do you think made him as successful as he was?
Well, people could relate to him. I mean, you know, they call him the blue-collar billionaire, and that's really what he was. You know, if you met him, he was as congenial and respectful and polite to you as you know, you and I would be sitting here. Mm-hmm. Just a good guy, and people got the sense that his heart was in the right place. And certainly the fact that he was a businessman and not a politician, and he kept honing in on that, I think really attracted people that were all tired of politicians just BSing us. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what really attracted people to him. He related to the average Larry the Lunch Pail kind of person, you know, mm-hmm. which was so much of that was the Midwest. And of course, you know, that's where, you know, Hillary didn't spend her time, right. and you know, he spent a lot of time, as we did, on the road.
Well, the uber elite metropolitan tea drinkers are on the coast. They're not
right.
in the heartland. Let me ask you this. He's getting beaten up right now. I mean, we're 2 years into his presidency. He's getting beaten up by Republicans. He's getting beaten up by Democrats. He's getting beaten up by the press. Where does he get the tenacity and the wherewithal to not allow this to drag him down? His resolve is incredible.
You know, I'll relate to my book, Divine Intervention. I think it was really God's plan that he wins because, as I say in my book, he may not be the perfect president, but he was the perfect person for the job at this time in history. Nobody could withstand what he's going through, and like you say, have the resolve to continue to take it, continue to fight, continue to accomplish really important things that impact the average American's life.
Does he have the wherewithal to do it for another 2 years and then get into the fight for another 4? Does he have 6 years in him?
Oh, I think without question, absolutely. He did this. I stood by that stage how many times and heard him say to people over and over, folks, I don't need to do this. I have a great company, a great business, a great family. I don't need to do this. I'm only doing it because there isn't anybody that's going to stand up and do the right thing by the American people.
What did you learn from working on the campaign?
Certainly the resolve that he has. I mean, the resolve that we had, because once we hit December 2015, they came to me and said, hey, Sid, we need somebody to run the ground campaign, and your name came up. I said, great, let's do it. What's a ground campaign? So just like Trump, and I say this in the back cover story of my book, just like Trump, I was never involved in politics, just like he wasn't. So that resolve to press on, because once I started running the ground campaign here in New Hampshire, it turned into 85, 90 hours a week, every week, okay? And the coordination that it took to send people out all over the state properly and calling the right people, and you'd have to have the volunteers educated on what to say, what to ask, and so forth. And then to carry that forward after February, because once we won here in February, they asked me to do the same thing, and the strike team from New Hampshire was formed, which most people don't know about, that I tell about in the book, was formed to go forward and do what we did so well here in New Hampshire. And we did. So we left for South Carolina and Texas, then the entire Midwest all the way to California come June, and it was 85, 90 hours a week, month after month, flying into one state and the next state and the next state. So the tenacity and the resolve that it took And, it was never a job for us. It was a mission. It was a mission to save America. And I believe that is what Trump is all about, is a mission to save America.
Sid Bowdidge, the author of A Rush to Judgment, A Journey with Trump, God, and Love, joins me in the YCN studios. We'll be back with more Stark Reality right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to Stark Reality. I'm Keith Hanson. I'm joined by Sid Bowdidge, the author of A Rush to Judgment, A Journey with Trump, God, and Love. Again, Sid, thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
Book is great. I want to get into the why did you write this book in a second, but before, I want to focus just on the swamp. He talks about draining the swamp. He talks about Washington as a swamp, and I think a lot of people would agree. It is a swamp. He's not a politician, or at least he wasn't prior to this. Could he have been effective, or as effective as he has been, if he had been entrenched in that swamp? Or is really what makes him so successful the fact that he's not a part of it, and that he can objectively and impartially identify where the issues are, that he's not inured to all of the problems in Washington?
Right. He's not. You're right. That is exactly true. And my belief is, again, being a businessman, being an outsider from there, not being involved in the swamp, that's why he's accomplishing what he's accomplishing. And no, I don't think if he was in the swamp, again, if we had just hired another politician, we would have had the same old, same old. So my opinion, no, there's no way that we have moved along to the extent that he has so far, and bringing thousands of jobs back, companies back. You could go on and on with his accomplishments and the important factors that have fallen into place, like our Supreme Court justices that have been elected. I mean, these are decisions that will impact this country for decades to come, and likely another one before he's even done. So no, if he was part of the swamp, there's no way we're at where we're at.
And so what I'm picking up is that you're saying, I got to file this one away for later, status quo doesn't get the job done.
Absolutely not. Okay. There's no way it happens if it's a politician. No way. And that's why he had to slice and dice, 16 people, get them out of the way. And the swamp is so bad, so deep. As a matter of fact, the media today, it's kind of frightening as to where is this going to end up? Where is this going to go? Because free speech is being somewhat taken away wherever they can by the left, and then you have the media, which is just what he calls it. It's fake news. It's incredible. If you really look behind the scenes and kind of get an idea of what's happening behind the scenes, there's no way that what you watch on CNN and mainstream media, it's not true. So without Trump, it's not happening.
I'm not going to mention the name, but of course there is a fairly famous talk show host whose line is, "There's a war on for your mind." And I think it's absolutely true. I mean, that the mainstream media, the drive-by media, the special interest groups, all this, there is absolutely a war on for people's minds. So right. As you've seen, I mean, you've worked with the campaign firsthand. You've met the man, you know the man firsthand basis. And then you read what you're reading and you hear what you're hearing. And so what advice would you give to people on how to be able to weed through all the crap and differentiate what's actual and genuine from what's contrived and manufactured?
Well, common sense comes into play at some point. And we are in a...
That's a flower that doesn't grow in everybody's garden, though.
It doesn't. But, I mean, it's so much of it is just common sense. If you hear something, you see something, and it doesn't make sense to you, it's probably not true, right? It's the old Judge Judy philosophy. If it doesn't make sense, it's not true. But we're in a war of ideologies today is really what we're in. It's a war of the liberal socialist ideology versus the conservative, God-driven, moral ethic ideology. Now, where is that going to play out? Where's it going to go? Who knows? But that's the war we have in front of us.
So 2020 coming up, of course, a very, very pivotal election, both on a state level and on a national level. As far as the Democrats go, rough guess about 30 to 32 potential hats to be thrown into the ring on the Democratic side of the aisle. Is Trump going to be primaried? Well, I think there's a couple of people who would like to do that. Jeff Flake, of course, and Ohio Governor John Kasich. Do you think either one of those, and I really can't think of anybody else who would want to jump into the fray, right. Do you think that either Flake or Kasich is packing anything even close to what would be necessary to primary Trump out?
Not in any way do I think they have a chance. And I don't just say that out of, just out of optimism. I really believe that neither of those guys would or could stand up and do what Trump's doing. And I think at this point, the American public has certainly seen enough. The proof is in the pudding. And I think there's, people are not as stupid as the Democrats and the liberal socialists think they are. Okay, just like look at what happened with Hillary, and that's why that happened. They just pretty much looked at middle-class America as just not being all that smart, and they're not going to get it, and we'll just be able to feed them the same old BS, and we'll win. And look what happened. It was a slaughter, So no, I don't think they have a prayer. And I don't think as long as the left continues with their divisive, nasty rhetoric and their attacks on Trump, that's going to take their focus off what they really need to be focusing on. And I think by and large, it's going to play out for another win in 2020.
You're watching Stark Reality on YCN. More with Sid Bowdidge when we come back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Stark Reality. I'm your host, Keith Hanson, and I'm joined this week by author Sid Bowdidge, the author of A Rush to Judgment, A Journey with Trump, God, and Love. The big question, why'd you write a book?
Well, as the story played out, and we traveled across the country, in our minds, we were doing this to save the country. I mean, that's really what it was. It was a mission to save America from the scourge of socialism. And as it went further and went on and on, you saw what Hillary was all about, which we all knew anyway, but it gradually just, we knew we had to win, that we just couldn't, losing just wasn't an option. We had to win. So the more the media and everybody said there's no way Trump's going to pull this off, there's no way Trump's going to win, the harder we worked to make sure we did. And I had some incredible people with me on the strike team. Some other people joined in. I met my very best friend through this, driving in the motorcade in New Hampshire. Jason Squelia, just a wonderful, wonderful patriot out of Massachusetts, and we became best friends. And that's part of the love of the book, is the good side of politics, the wonderful people you do meet. And I don't want to let this go by without mentioning all the volunteers. Without the incredible volunteers, we never would have won. So, I always like to say thank you to all the people, the hundreds of thousands of people who, as we landed in each state, poured into campaign offices to help us phone bank and door knock. Okay, so I came back after the primary, went to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland as a whip for Alaska, which again, I had never done this stuff before, so it was just, even that was incredible. And you talk about inspirational, and then came back after that, and I helped the RNC run the ground campaign in New Hampshire. Now, what I didn't know was when you're on the winning team, after we won, what I didn't know is you get a job in D.C. if you want one. So I applied for a couple of departments, got a job in the Department of Energy as what's called a political appointee, went there, and in 3 weeks, I got a call from, an email from an editor of a source called Green Tech Media. And he said, "Hey Sid, I found what you put on your Twitter last year to be very interesting as a political appointee." So the long story made short on this was a year before, when then Mr. Trump had put out a picture of the San Bernardino killers, I had made a disparaging mark about jihadist Muslims under it. Well, then it was off to run the ground campaign. I never tweeted again. It was my only tweet ever. So now fast forward a year or so later, a year and a half, and somebody in the administration, the DOE, looked back at my social media, took that comment, twisted it to mean that I wanted to do away with all Muslims, not just jihadist Muslims, took it to the media, and it made 10 pages of Google all over the internet. And
ain't social media grand.
In 2 hours, I was out of my job in the Department of Energy. So pretty devastating. Relied on my faith because I had to forgive this guy, and I did. Which was really, once I did, it was easy. And then I took that positive energy to figure out what am I going to do from here. Came home and some people said to me, "Sid, what a great story. You should write a book." And I thought, well, my goodness, I've never written a book before, but I've always been pretty good at writing. So quite frankly, I prayed about it, and the good Lord put the answer in my heart, Keith, which was write the book from your heart. It'll be inspirational to other people. So I took 8 months and wrote the book, wrote the whole story. It's about 120 pictures in there of shots that people have never seen before all over the country that I took, like the Beverly Hills SWAT team, armored vehicle with machine gun, police all over the place around Trump's house in Beverly Hills when we were motorcading him out there. So stuff like that. It was just an unbelievable experience. And, as I say, it was our Super Bowl. And, I got to play a role in a Super Bowl and make a difference, which most people just don't get to do.
Excellent. We've got about 30 seconds left. How can people find the book?
It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble online, and it's available as an ebook as well.
All right.
So it's very inspirational. It helps people. If people aren't faith followers, it will help you maybe find something that I found, which is very important in my life, changed my life, and then also in terms of stepping out and getting involved in doing something that you never did before.
All right. Sid, God bless, and have a Merry Christmas.
God bless you too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much,
Appreciate
Keith.
it.
Thank you.
A Rush to Judgment is the book, A Journey with Trump, God and Love. The author, Sid Bowdidge. And that's going to do it for this week on Stark Reality. Kay Hanson at ycnnow.com. That's Kay Hanson at ycnnow.com. Be sure to let me know your thoughts, your city, and your first name as well, too. And we'll read them on air as well. And speaking of that evil social media, be sure to follow me on Twitter at RealKeithHanson. That's at RealKeithHanson on Twitter. Have a very, very Merry Christmas, everybody. Look forward to being back with you here next week on YCN.